Alright, so hello drummers, Mr. Dorn here. Super excited to be working with everyone on Zoom classes and online content and all this really great stuff. And today what we're going to be talking about is how to understand some of the rhythmic things that we have to know as drummers. But my favorite part about learning these things is that they apply to every instrument. So if you're playing drums and then you decide down the road maybe you want to pick up trumpet, or maybe you want to, you know, be in a play, or you want to sing some song with the choir, or you want to play trombone or bass guitar or something, everything you learn on the drums applies to everything. So a quarter note is always a quarter note, an eighth note is always an eighth note, and it all works really well. So we're going to dive in and we're going to start working on these concepts. Looking forward to it. So we're going to start out. So looking at worksheet 1, we have a whole note, and if you're looking at worksheet 1, it's the first measure, but our whole note will always look like this. It's the one that's the big circle, right? No lines attached to it. No flags on it, no anything like that. And whole notes are worth 4 beats for right now. So what we're thinking of is a whole note is worth 4 beats. It's a long note and it's worth 4 beats value. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're off, all right? So it's worth 4 beats. Now, something that's a little different for when you're playing drums is that like our long notes and our short notes are the same. Like, is that a long note? Is that a short note? It depends what comes after it. That's what kind of determines whether we played a long note or a short note, right? So for drums, when we're playing a whole note, we get to play on beat 1 and the note's kind of held out through the measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you played on a percussion instrument that has length, like if you're playing on xylophone, or maybe you played on timpani or trumpet or another instrument, then you would actually hold that note out longer and it'd go like ta, and it would be a long note worth 4 beats. So that's our whole note. So what we need to understand with the whole note is, again, they are the big, they kind of look like circles, right? And they're the big black ones. And they're hollow. They don't have any stems on them. They don't have any flags coming off them or anything like that. Now, what we can have when we're dealing with whole notes is for everything we play, we have a counterpart to it that we don't play. So if it's a note, we're going to play it. And then you've probably already figured out if we don't play it, it's what? A rest, right? So notes play, rest don't play. And for everything we do play, we have an exact equal counterpart that we don't play. So whole note, whole rest, quarter note, quarter rest, half note, half rest, eighth note, eighth rest. It keeps going all the way down just like that. So and we're going to talk about those in a second, but just keep that in mind, that we have things that we play, things that we don't play. That's about as simple as it gets, really. So the next one we are going to look at is, we just looked at the whole note. We're going to look at the half note now. So our whole note was worth 4. And if you're thinking whole note's 4, what do you think a half note is? 2, right? Half of 4, 2. And the one thing I like about counting and, working with like whole notes and half notes and eighth notes, is it's all very exact. Like there isn't any flexible, like on Monday it was worth 2 beats, but on Wednesday it can maybe worth 3 beats. It's always 2 beats. A half note is always 2 beats. So our half note looks pretty similar to our whole note. See if you guys can see that. So it looks similar to our whole note in that it still has the whole note down here, but we're coming over here, we're drawing one straight line on it, and that now is our half note, and it is worth 2 beats. So our whole note was worth 4, That means we play on beat 1, right, and hold it out for 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I had half notes, they would be 2 beats long. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're each worth 2 beats value. Now, our next note we're going to talk about is the quarter note. Now, this is one that is extremely common, that you see all the time, and is really important to understand because they come up all the time. And everything we talk about, whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, we're going to get into eighth notes, and then eventually we're going to talk about 16th notes, and we may even go farther than that. But you have to understand everything that comes before it, because it all works together. And if you are playing something that is complex, it could have whole notes in it, it could have half notes, it could have quarter notes, it has all of that jumbled up together, and that's what can make something sound really cool or really complex or hard or fast or something like that, is all of these things combined. So we're going to look at quarter notes next. Now, our whole note, remember, was the like circle, didn't have anything connected to it, right? Just it takes up the whole bar. Our half note is the whole note with one line off of it. Now our quarter note looks exactly like our half note, except it's filled in. So looks pretty similar to our half note, but we are filled in now with a, so it's a solid circle, right? And that's our quarter note. And quarter notes, the way I like to think of these is that if you had $1, 4 quarters make up $1, right? Well, 4 quarter notes make up 1 bar of 4/4 time. So we have 4 quarter notes in a bar. So our quarter notes each get 1 beats value. So whole note got 4, half note got 2, quarter note gets 1. So if I was going to play 4 quarter notes in a row, I'd be playing 1, 2, 3, 4. Every one of my large counts would get a hit, right, on the drum. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's how we're going to play quarter notes. Now that we kind of understand whole notes, half notes, and quarter notes, one thing we can kind of start thinking about now is what they look like on the page. Now, when you're looking at a page, and if you want to pull up worksheet 1, this is a great example. You'll see that all of your whole notes and your quarter notes and things like that are written on a staff, right? Or on just a single line if you play drums. And what you'll see is there's a C right at the start. And that C is actually our time signature. And the C stands for common time. And common time is 4/4 time. So if we turn on Kiss FM right now, I can guarantee 100%, you turn on Kiss FM right now, whatever song they're playing, it is in 4/4. And if you turn it on tomorrow at 3 o'clock, it'll be 4/4. Turn it on tonight at 8 p.m., it'll be 4/4. 4/4, the time signature, is by far the most common time signature that we hear all the time. And it really doesn't, I mean, it goes across genres. You can be listening to rock music, pop music, soundtracks from films, jazz music, classical music. I mean, 4/4 is by far the most common, which is why sometimes composers will use the symbol C, just because it's quicker to write, to stand for common time, which is 4/4. So before we get in any farther, so we understand half notes, we understand whole notes, we understand quarter notes now, we understand their values. Now we got to kind of understand how they function on a page. So what we're going to think about is our time signature 4/4. So, and if you flip in your workbook, you'll see 4/4 come up. Like if you flip to page, like page 10, if you just flip to the following page, you'll see that there's a 4/4 there. But if you don't have a workbook accessible right now, that's totally okay. But your time signature looks like this. So it's a 4 and a 4 just on top of each other. And it kind of looks like a fraction. But it's not a fraction. Looks like a fraction, not a fraction, doesn't have anything to do with fractions. But it's a top 4 and a bottom 4. And the top 4 stands for one thing and the bottom 4 stands for another. And time signatures are kind of confusing for a lot of people, but I think that's just because they haven't been explained very well sometimes, or at all. And a lot of people just understand that 4/4 means you have 4 beats and that's it, and you go on. And time signatures are really important to understand, especially if you play drums, because drummers will consistently play in time signatures that are not 4/4. So it really takes a strong understanding of what a time signature is to play in what are called odd time signatures, which could be 3, 6, 7, something like that. So let's take our 4/4 fraction, and if we're looking at it here, there it is. So here it's written on a full staff. If you're playing drum set, sometimes it's written on a single line. Sometimes drum set stuff is written on 3 lines. Snare drums are sometimes written on 1 line. But 4/4 is always a top 4 and a bottom 4. So thinking about that, we have our top 4. Now, our top 4 tells us how many counts are in each bar, right? So if we look at this again, this would be 1 bar, right? Because we have our treble clef, we have our 5 staff lines here, we have our time signature, and then we have an end line right over here. And so that tells us this is 1 bar, and our 4 on top tells us that in this 1 bar we have 4 beats, 4 counts, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that bar is finished. Then we go to our next bar, bar 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, that bar is finished. Then you go to bar 3. Now, like I said, this is kind of scientific in that your 4/4, you can only have 4 beats. You can't go to 5, you can't go to 3, you can't go to 3.5, you have to go to 4 every time. If we were playing and say I wanted 4 beats in this bar, but then the next bar I only wanted 3 beats, then I would have to have a 4 on top here, and my next bar I would have to change the time signature, and I would have to have a 3 on top. You have to change the time signature if you want to change the counts. Otherwise it has to equal 4 every single time. So our top 4, this is important, our top 4 tells us how many counts are in the bar. So we know there's 4. Now our top, if we're thinking of time signature, we have something on top, something on bottom, right? 4, for right now we have 4 and 4, but those can change. Now your top one can be anything. It could be 7, 13, 12, 11, it could be anything. Theoretically, I always have students ask, like, could it be in 100? Sure, theoretically. I've never seen that in my life, but it could be. It can be anything on top. Now the bottom is a lot more specific, and the bottom functions with it's kind of like a code is the way I kind of think about it. So if we're thinking in 4/4, we have a 4 on top, okay, we know there's 4 counts in each bar, perfect. Now, we know there's 4 counts in each bar, but what are we counting? We don't know yet. So the bottom 4 tells us what we're counting. And like I said, the bottom kind of functions like a code, and that 4 means quarter notes. That one makes sense, right? 4 quarter notes in a bar, like we talked about, 4 quarters and $1. That one makes sense. Excellent. So for the bottom, you can have a 1, a 2, a 4, or an 8. And technically there's a few others, but we're gonna stop there because you don't see those hardly at all. So you have 1, 2, 4, and 8. And if you've already been playing through worksheet 1 and you've already played through maybe worksheet 2 and you've kind of checked out some things, maybe you've been playing drums for a while, maybe you played another instrument for a while, you've probably already figured out this code. But a 1 is our code for a whole note, which that one makes sense because we talked about our whole note taking up 1 full bar, right? 4 beats, so there's 1 whole note to a bar. Well, 1's the bottom number. Excellent, that makes sense. And if we remember when we talked about half notes, our half note was worth 2 beats. Well, that makes sense as well because 2 is our bottom code for half note. And then 4, we already discussed, is quarter note, and then you've probably already figured it out, 8th is 8th note, right? So if you got an 8 on the bottom, that means it equals our 8th note. So thinking about 4 on top, we know we have 4 beats in each bar. So you could have 4, like for time signatures, we could have 4-1, we could have 4-2, we could have 4-4, and I need 4 more fingers down here, 4-8, right? Those would all be legitimate time signatures. And we could of course change the top too. We could make it a 3, we could make it a 2. But let's kind of think about that for a second. So if we had 4-4, then we know we have a top 4 and a bottom 4. So we know the top 4 tells us we have 4 counts in each bar. Excellent. We know we're counting to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it starts over. 1, 2, 3, 4, forever and always until the time signature changes. Perfect. So we know the top 4 beats in each bar. We don't know what we're counting yet. So if we put a 4 on the bottom, then we know there's 4 beats in every bar, and the quarter note gets the count. So now we know there's 4 quarter notes value in every bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, right? And then you're on the second bar, third bar, so on and so forth. So let's kind of do a hard one now. Let's do 3-4. So we have a 3 on top, and I'll pull that up and kind of show you what that would look like. So it would look exactly like 4-4, except you guessed it, there's a 3 on top. So if we're taking the time signature of 3-4, then we know we have 3 beats in every bar. So we can't go to 2, can't go to 4, have to stop at 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And we know that the 4 is on the bottom. That was our code for quarter note. So we know that the quarter note gets the counts, 3 beats to the bar. We know there's 3 quarter notes value to each bar. Excellent. So from there, you can go through and you can find where all the counts are. So that's why we have to figure out these time signatures, because as drummers and as really anyone that plays any instrument, you have to understand how many counts you're expected to play in a bar, so you can tell where beat 1 is, you can tell where beat 2 is there a beat 3, is there a beat 4, is there a beat 5, like you have to understand all of that so you can place everything right in time and everything can sound as it should. So let's do one more kind of hard one. We'll kind of think through this. Let's do 5-2. Okay, this is really weird. I've never seen this time signature in my life. I don't even know if it exists on sheet music, but we're gonna take it. So 5-2, we have a 5 on top, we have a 2 on bottom. So thinking about it, we would have, I always start with the top number, so I know there's 5 beats to every bar. So I'm looking for 5 beats to every bar. So I know I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm done with that measure, right? And going to the next one. But I don't know what gets the beat. Like, what am I counting as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Well, it's a 2 on the bottom. And if you remember, our 2 was our code for half notes. So that means that we would have, this is weird, 5 half notes to every bar. That's really bizarre, but that's what the time signature would say. Now, there are some time signatures that you will see. Like I said, 4-4 is the most common, but 2-4 is very common, 3-4 is very common, 6-8 is very common. That's 6 beats to every bar, but the 8th note gets the count, and we're going to get into 8th notes in a second. So you will see some other time signatures as you continue playing. But that's a really quick crash course on time signatures, really important to understand. So we're going to jump back into what we were talking about earlier, and we're going to take it a little farther now. So we talked about whole notes, and just as a quick refresher, whole notes were 4 beats value, right? We talked about half notes, they get 2 beats. Quarter notes get 1, and then these are some of my favorites. Now we get to 8th notes. And 8th notes, I think, are a lot of fun for drums because a lot of drumming patterns that I like are all 8th note based. So if you're playing like drum set beats and grooves on the drum set, or if you're in marching band and you're playing like some cool snare pattern, a lot of times they're centered around 8th notes. So I really enjoy them. But 8th notes can be a little confusing. So they look like quarter notes, except I'll show you guys here. They have 1 flag coming off of them, and that's what tells us it's an 8th note, okay? So it looks still like our quarter note. We have our black circle, we have our line coming up, and we have our one flag coming down. But this now tells us that instead of a quarter note, this is an eighth note because of the flag. Now, eighth notes you can see like 3 different ways, 4 different ways. They come in all different kind of shapes and sizes. So you can see them like this with one flag coming off. You can also see them when they put 2 eighth notes together. Instead of just drawing 2 flags, a lot of times what they'll do, they could draw 2 flags. That's totally acceptable. You could draw an eighth note, 1 flag, an eighth note, 1 flag. That would still be 2 eighth notes. But what composers started to do long time ago was they would take an eighth note, and they would connect them. So the way I kind of think about it is you had a flag coming off this one, you had a flag off that one, and you kind of pick the flags up, boom, it sits on top, and it's still eighth notes. So a good way to think about these is if it has one flag coming off of it, which was like that, if it has one flag or it has one line, it's an eighth note, okay? So eighth notes have one something coming off of one flag, one line. Now, when we're dealing with eighth notes, one thing that changes is we have to change our counting system. So when we're dealing with whole notes, half notes, and quarter notes, we deal with our, what I call like our really large counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the really large counts. Now with eighth notes, we're now doing 2 notes to every 1 beat. So if I'm playing my 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's my quarter note, right? If we're thinking quarter notes, we're in 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, right? Okay, so those are quarter notes going. If I want to play eighth notes, I have to play 2 notes to every 1 beat. So I'm going to play a bar of quarter notes, and then I'm going to play a bar of eighth notes, and I'm going to count so you can hear the change. So 1, 2, 3, and then to eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So how we change our counting system is we add what's called the and of the beat. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, but we also have the and of 1, the and of 2, the and of 3, and the and of 4. It's kind of a tongue twister. So you have your eighth note counting system right there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay? So once you have that, a really good exercise to get comfortable with eighth notes, and you can clap it, you can play it on the drums, you can play it on any instrument really, is to play a bar of quarter notes and then 1 bar of eighth notes. And what this does is it works on being able to play that change where you're adding the and to each beat. So if I was going to play that, it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You can do it without sticks too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, a good challenge for any instrumentalist, but especially drummers, is, and this will kind of feel like rub your belly, pat your head the first time you try it, is you're going to tap your foot. So I'm tapping my foot, tap, 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 and that's going to be my quarter note. So we're in 4/4 again, staying in 4/4 time, 4 beats to every bar. So if I'm tapping my foot on the quarter note, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, keep that going. Don't stop that. So I'm going to keep my quarter note tapping, but I'm going to play with my hands, with my sticks, whatever. I'm going to play 4 quarter notes and then 4 eighth notes just like we did, but I'm not going to change my foot. Now, one thing you're going to figure out is your right foot if you're right-handed, you're tapping your right foot. If you're left-handed, you can tap your left foot or your right foot. But what you'll find is that, I'm gonna stop tapping my foot 1 second so I can talk. What you're gonna find is that the human body likes to be in sync. And that's what drummers fight all the time. We're fighting to expand ourselves so we can separate our limbs and independence and things like that. But what we find as drummers is that the human body likes to be in sync. So my right foot likes to line up with my right hand. My left foot likes to line up with my left hand. And where it gets weird is if you try to line up right foot with left hand and right hand with left foot, or both feet with left hand. That's where it gets complicated, and that's what drummers practice a lot, is being able to separate their feet from their hands, so that maybe in a halftime show they can, you know, they're holding onto a drum, they got, you know, the drum harness on, they can go from one side of the football field to the other in time while playing. They're separating their feet from their hands. Or if you see drum set players, they're constantly separating their feet from their hands. Maybe they're playing a cool pattern over here, but their foot is playing something, you know, like your foot could be playing a hi-hat or a cowbell or a wood block or something crazy over here. So we work on separating all of that out. So this will feel, if it feels a little awkward the first time you try it, totally okay. It's supposed to. First time I tried it, it felt super weird and I had to practice it. So this is something that it might not come, you know, it may not be perfect the first time you play it. That's okay. This one will take practice. You have to kind of try it every day. And, you know, within 5-6 days, you'll be perfect, being able to play everything in time. So we're going to tap quarter notes with our right foot. We're going to play a bar of quarter notes, or clap a bar of quarter notes, and then we're going to clap a bar of eighth notes. So remember, our quarter note counting is just our large counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Our eighth note counting is where we add the ands of the beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So I'm going to clap it and play it, okay? So I'm going to clap it first. So first I'm going to get my quarter note tapping. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. All right, here we go. So I'm going to count it off, and then we're going to play a bar of quarter notes, bar of eighth notes. Here we go. We're going to keep going. So it'll be bar of quarter notes, bar of eighth notes, bar of quarter notes, bar of eighth notes. Here we go. 1, 2, quarter notes, and 1, 2, 3, 2 eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3. Back to quarters. 1, 2, 3, 4 eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now I'm gonna try it with sticks. All right, here we go. 1, 2 quarter notes first. 1, 2, 3, 4 eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 quarters. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and stop. Excellent. So that is an excellent exercise, and I have found that is super helpful to be able to do that before you even see it on the page, because then when you guys do see eighth notes on the page, and right now if you're working on worksheet 1 or worksheet 2 or rhythm sheet 1, eventually really quick, like rhythm sheet 3, worksheet 4, you're going to start seeing eighth notes. And I have found it is very helpful to have an understanding of eighth notes before you get there. That way when you flip the page to it, you'll be like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Eighth notes, you kind of remember the counting system. It'll all kind of make sense versus flipping the page and being like, whoa, I've never seen that in my life. So that is a super important thing, and eighth notes are a lot of fun, and they get, if you're playing drums, which that's my favorite instrument, if you're playing drums, eighth notes come up with a lot of really cool patterns, because you guys have probably heard, like, there's a lot of cool drumline things where they play eighth notes pretty quick, but they're going like, and they're playing these kind of eighth note based patterns, or they'll be like go up on the rim and play an eighth note based pattern. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so they're just kind of, that eighth note becomes this grid where they can put all these cool patterns over. So it's really a lot of fun for drums, and I really enjoy playing them. And then, just as a total sneak peek to what we're going to continue on to, is then you get into 16th notes after 8th notes. And if you thought 8th notes were fun, 16th notes are twice as fun. So really, really cool. So we're going to do a quick 60-second recap. Put 60 seconds on the clock. Don't really do it. I may go longer than 60 seconds. It may be like 70 seconds. But that doesn't sound as cool. So 60 seconds on the clock. And we are going to review. So our whole note is worth how many beats? Hope you said 4. So remember, whole note is worth 4 beats. No flags coming off of it, no stems, no lines, and it's worth 4 of our big counts, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Our next note would be our half note. Looks exactly like our whole note, except has 1 line. And this one, I think, is one of the easiest ones to figure out, because if you figured out whole note, then you have to know half notes, because whole note's 4, half of 4 is 2, perfect. Our half note, 2 beats, right? Hollow, but does have a stem. And then we get to our most famous note, the one that everyone starts out on and plays a lot, which that's our quarter note. Our quarter notes get all of our big beats, right? If we're in 4/4 for our time signature, our quarter notes would get 1, 2, 3, 4. They would get all 4 counts, and that's the one that looks like our half note, but is filled in, right? So we had our half note, hollow with a stem, and then we have our quarter note filled in, but yet still with our stem coming off, right? And then we get into one that we just talked about, our eighth notes, which look just like our quarter notes, except they have 1 flag coming off of them, or you can connect them and they can have 2 flags. Now, when I didn't add this earlier, but I'm going to tell you guys now, when you're connecting eighth notes, they can connect 2, they could also connect 4. And there's some other combos that you'll see too, but 2 and 4 is by far the most common. So even if you see 4 eighth notes with 1 line all connecting them, it's still 4 eighth notes in a row. Even if you saw 4 individual eighth notes with the stems and the flags, it's still 4 eighth notes. So how I kind of think about eighth notes is, if you wrote your first name and like you put it in Microsoft Word, right? You wrote your first name, and I'm gonna use, like, say, I'll use, like, say your name's Colton. So you write Colton. All right, it's in Microsoft Word. Then you go and you italicize it. What's the word? It's still your name, right? What if you underline it? Still your name. What if you change the font? Still your name, right? It just changes how it looks on the page. And eighth notes kind of work the same way. So if they have the line with the flag, eighth note. If they have 4 of them together with 1 line connecting all of them, still eighth notes. It just changes how they look on the page. So this is kind of, I know this was a quick crash course on you know, whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and eighth notes, but hopefully you'll find this really helpful. And as we go on and we start working on you know, worksheets 3 and 4 and you know, rhythm sheets like 5 and 6 and 7, this is all going to be really helpful information. So thanks for checking this out. I hope everyone had fun. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I would love to answer them. This is my favorite thing to do, is talk drums and rhythm and all these fun things. So I hope everyone has an awesome day. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see everyone on some other exercises. Thanks.